Korthos Island is the first place any new player will see in Dungeons & Dragons Online, and likely the first exposure the player will have to Dito's storytelling experience. From Korthos Island, the player learns what it is to be an adventurer, in whatever capacity they deem fitting for their character, and first begin to explore the world that games developer Turbine originally showcased and Standing Stone Games continues to promote. Howdy-o, this is Rabbit of ScrubLeet Academy, and today I want to investigate the lore of Korthos Island, picking up where we left off from Part 1. The player, after getting some direction from Sigmund Bowerson, is sent off to find 3 other individuals who may need help against the Sauhagan threat. Viggy Storr, the village's mayor, has reported that his daughter Arissa went missing in the night as one of many disappearances, and that they are being held in the old Caneth Aqueduct deep in Sauhagan territory to await indoctrination, or death and resurrection. Wilm, a halfling envoy of Lady Drusen Dejrasko, has lost track of his mistress. He soon discovers, whether by confronting a witness or just remembering suddenly, that she had been assaulted and captured by a series of undead led by an intelligent wight. He begs the player's assistance, with some valuables as payment. Ursa Yarnsvard, a guard under Sigmund's son Askel Bowerson's command, swears she saw a man resembling Lars Hayton down by the presumably abandoned Caneth manufactory, far into the Korthos wilderness. She begs the player's assistance in finding Hayton and securing his allegiance. The player ventures into the wilderness, passing a warforged guard at the exit gate by the name of Amalgam, and confronts Sigmund's other son, Gunnar Bowerson, scouting the Sauhagan presence at an underground complex. He swears they're attempting to rouse a great beast beneath Korthos village. If they manage this, he says, Korthos will fall more surely than a direct attack. The player chooses to help Gunnar, and makes this their highest priority. The player leaps off the cliff into a substantial pool below and fights 3 Sauhagan guards stationed outside of the sewer entrance to the complex. They then proceed through a corridor and choose one of 2 doors leading into a large atrium bearing a statue to the Devourer, which is spewing gouts of air chill enough to freeze the skin. They march over an icy floor and defeat 2 waves of Sauhagan and an ice mephit guarding levers to open a room leading to the trap. The player disables the trap and smashes a gong twice, the reverberating sound waves enough to shatter the icy floor and permit access to the further reaches of the underground. After a short swim, the player climbs up a ladder and clears the last of the Sauhagan defending the great beast before stumbling on a dangerous ice spider, a beast likely tactically positioned to prevent anyone who might have gotten this far from interfering in the Sauhagan's plan. The player defeats the spider and uses an ancient device to redirect the spray of cold air towards the Devourer Beast's chamber, encasing it in ice and preventing the Sauhagan from being able to wake it for some time while they seek out the missing Korthos villagers. The player leaves the underground complex, fighting their way through swarms of Sauhagan and cultists on the outside. With the threat of the Sauhagan looming, and only the shortest time bought, after all, how long could it take for the Sauhagan to thaw that beast? The player opts to follow the rumors of Lars Hayton, desperate for another capable fighter to take the fight to the Devourer cult. The player travels to the ancient Caneth manufactory, where a troop of Sauhagan and cultists have narrowed in themselves, arising suspicion that the rumors are more than they appear. The player enters, finding Caneth contraptions in various states of disarray, and traps having been set off. Several of these contraptions take the form of rusty iron defenders, dog-like machines designed as war instruments and guardians by artificers, particularly for use in the last war on the continent of Corvair. Their presence, and the fact that they've been moderately maintained when all the rest of the manufactory has fallen into complete disarray, further raises the player's suspicion that someone is here. Knowing the myths surrounding Hayton, maintaining these ancient defenders doesn't seem beyond his abilities. The player clears through the manufactory, coming up to a sealed room within which 3 Caneth crystals exist beneath currents of cooling air. Disabling the particularly new Caneth configuration, the player destroys the crystals in order to reach a room over which a shield had sat, completing their exploration of the manufactory as they confront a warforged and an old man. The man confirms his identity as Lars Hayton, but panics almost immediately as he sees that his shield has fallen and the Sauhagan are able to enter the chamber. They leap from the pool of water in waves, no longer deterred, and the player joins the Warforged Guard and Hayton in finishing off the assault. After the player kills Hayton's pursuers and keeps him from succumbing to the Sohagan alone, Hayton still initially rejects the player's pressure, but the player reminds him of Kaya, implying the two have a close relationship, and Hayton opts to come out of hiding and fight the menace alongside Korthos village for her sake. And what's more, Hayton has been researching ways of repelling the Sohagan, despite forsaking the village. It is his belief that the dragon is not in line with the Sohagan, but has been manipulated by a creature called a Mind Flayer. Also known as Illithids, the Mind Flayer is capable of manipulating the minds of other creatures. Normally, though, dragons should have some resistance to such influence. There's a piece missing. Nonetheless, Hayton rallies his guards, including Amalgam, the Warforged guard outside of the gate to Korthos, who had since hidden his allegiance with Hayton for his and Hayton's mutual safety. Having found Hayton, the player leaves him to prepare for the Sohagan at Misery's Peak, the mountain where the Sohagan bring their corpses for reanimation. The player has to save the rest of the Korthos villagers, or any they can find who still remain. Being nearest to the decrepit catacombs that Wilm, the halfling of House Shirasco, had mentioned, the player moves to secure Lady Drusen first. The player avoids a couple of ornery bats who've recently reclaimed the crypt, but undead surround them and the player is forced to put them down once more. Lady Drusen stands prisoner beyond a magical gateway, similar to those the player has already disarmed. There must be some levers powering it nearby. A cultist and a Sohagan are found deep in the chamber, each guarding one of the two levers required to deactivate the barrier. However, when the player returns to free Lady Drusen, they hear someone behind them. Jacoby Drexelhand again, this time with a skeleton knight guarding him, a powerful foe. Jacoby has become a wight and has been capturing villagers for the Sohagan. His presence implies that his role has changed and he is now in charge of raising all of Korthos' dead, spelling bad news for the remaining villagers as the Sohagan seem to have opted for necromancy over indoctrination. The player crushes Jacoby one last time, finishing him in the hopes that this is the last time they'll meet. The player frees Lady Drusen and escorts her out of the crypt before immediately moving to the old aqueduct to prevent more reincarnations from happening. They race through Sohagan and cultists, who are rampant in their fervor to resurrect every corpse they can find, and the player puts down everything they come across. The player enters the structure and evades some pests on their way to retrieve the villagers. Luckily, it seems that most of them are alive, if a little worse for wear. The player saves Zara Fjord, Hita, Nikolai, Prissine Ware, who bears some resemblance to Linus Ware, and Petty Brunhem. They then hurry through several corridors, crushing a powerful arcane skeleton and denying the Devourer cult a mighty force against the magically inept guardians of Korthos village. The player finally makes it to Drenel Fallow, a high-ranking cultist, after killing the last of the Sohagan in the corridors. He, at the time of the player's arrival, is torturing Arissa Store, a practice the player quickly interrupts. The player finishes him and frees Arissa, but all is not done. One more corridor awaits and the search for more prisoners continues. The player finds Dolph, Gazmir Yern, Yvette Mir, Edgar Freeholm, and Hagar Fjord behind some cell bars, leading them to safety through a back exit to the aqueduct structure, through which they can escape and avoid the Sohagan on their way back to the village. The player returns with them, reporting to the village their successes. The villagers fortify Korthos in preparation for a retaliatory attack, while the player heads back into the Korthos wilderness and finds Amalgam, who directs them to Misery's Peak. There, the player finds Lars Hayton and a few familiar faces, Selamus, Jeets, and Talbron Tune. The adventuring party, the player comes to realize, is not done on Korthos Island, and opts to act as a distraction for the dragon inside the cavernous Misery's Peak, while the player goes to disable the Mind Sunder, a relic Hayton believes is being used to overcome the dragon's resistance to mental influence and grant the Mind Flayer power over it. The player burns through the undead army of the Devourer cult and the cultists themselves, the sole humanoid occupants of Misery's Peak, after the Sohagan's crippling defeats nearer the village. The player traverses the intricate, interconnected network of Misery's Peak, opening doors the cultists have sealed and dealing with the local arachnid wildlife who have made Misery's Peak their home, before coming upon an icy corridor under which they can see Selamus' party fleeing the dragon. After a couple more doors, the cultists lay all but defeated, and the player arrives at a ritual chamber, the last element of major resistance for the Devourer cult. The cultists, all necromancers, conjure a vicious ice splinter fiend through some incredible magics, and the player manages to put the demonic beast down. They clean through one final sloping hallway filled with undead and enter a massive chamber, where the Mind Flayer struggles, even with the Mind Sunder's help, to contain the White Dragon. While they struggle, the Mind Sunder is vulnerable, and the player shatters it. The Mind Flayer immediately loses control of the dragon, and, as a Mind Flayer's fate would be to the ire of the White Dragon, it is destroyed. Jeets comes to collect the player, and all of them leave for Korthos Island via a portal lain down by Hayton. The player returns to a sunny Korthos village, the clouds and snowfall having been lifted with the dragon's evident departure. The journey complete, the hero of Korthos Island is directed to Stormreach, a city rife with opportunities for someone possessing their skill set. And that's it. Korthos Island is saved, and the player moves on to begin their journey truly in Stormreach. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. Do you like these kind of videos? Would you like to see some more of Dito's story in the future? Tell us what we might have missed, and what your thoughts are on the story thus far. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For a quick summary of what's happened so far, I'll leave you with this. The player heads out into the wilderness to take the fight to the Sohagan. There, they discover that the Sohagan are trying to awaken an ancient devourer beast beneath Korthos Island. The player beats them and seals the beast in an icy prison. The player goes in search of Lars Hayton, locating him in time to stop a Sohagan attack. Hayton joins the player and Korthos Village's rebellion. The traitor Jacoby Drexelhand re-emerges as an undead white necromancer, resurrecting fallen villagers and capturing the living. The player puts an end to him a second time, hopefully for good this time. The player greatly reduces the number of Sohagan populating Korthos Island, giving the villagers a chance to mobilize a proper defense. Several villagers are rescued, adding to Korthos' numbers, and every major Sohagan operation is foiled. The player storms through Misery's Peak, tearing down the structure of the Devourer cult and undermining a too ambitious Mind Flayer. The White Dragon is freed from mental influence, and Korthos Village is saved from the Sohagan menace. The Sohagan leadership, meanwhile, is fractured, and the remnants flee Korthos Island and the wrath of Lars Hayton. Thank you all once again. Until next time, bye-bye for now.